like it.
This project begins the same as my recent water table build, with me destroying my basement tool bench, which is no longer in use, to harvest usable lumber. The old bench has given its 2x4s to become a water table, as well as the 28-inch drawer slides being used in my double computer desk. And now the plywood is being reused for my new sanding station. Because my old bench was built before I owned a table saw, I had to true up each drawer side and rip them to a uniform width. I then quickly chopped all of one bad side and then cut to final length at the miter saw with my homemade long reach C-clamp stop block in place. There are 2 different lengths for the 8 drawers, with the front and back being the same, as well as the side pieces. I then cut all the old drawer bottoms down to the new size. The drawer construction is all 5/8 inch construction grade plywood and the cabinet is 3/4 inch plywood. However, the drawers could easily be 1/2 inch if you wanted to save some money. I then ripped the sides to width of the table saw and cut to final length of the miter saw. I then mark out my toe kick dimensions of 4 inch tall and 2 inches deep on the bottom front of the 3 upright panels. I raise the table saw blade and mark a stop point to cut the long edge of the toe kick. The short edge is then cut out at the bandsaw. I was given this old piece of 3/4 inch plywood and decided it would be good to use for my new sanding station top. It doesn't match the color of the other pieces, but hey, it was free and it's only shop furniture after all. After a little bit of aggressive sanding, the old plywood was breathing fresh air and looking good. The last piece to be cut out was the 1/4 inch hardboard backer, which I did with the help of my homemade track guide. I can now begin assembly of the 8 drawers, which all 8 are identical. I decided to try to build these drawers with only 1.5 inch me-nails and glue to see if they were strong enough to hold up over time. I can say so far that they seem insanely strong, and that's good news because building drawers this way is crazy fast and easy. Each corner got glued and held with 5 brad nails, whereas the bottom got glue and 8 million nails. Using my roofing square in the corners was very helpful in keeping the bottom aligned. This process was then repeated 8 times for each drawer. Next, at my homemade pocket hole machine, I drill 3 holes in each end of my bottom stretcher pieces for the cabinet structure. I set up a scrap piece of plywood in my vise to clamp the outer vertical piece to stop it from falling over, and lined up the top piece in the corner. I used my square and drilled pilot holes for 2-inch construction screws, spaced a few inches apart. On the other side, I lay a stretcher down to act as a spacer and attach a stretcher to the top front with 1 pocket screw to also act as a spacer. I then lay the center support in place and check it for square. And if you are wondering, those 2 clamps are acting as counterweight so the panel doesn't fall on me. I attach the top screw and draw a perpendicular line to show me where to drill more pilot holes to avoid splitting the plywood, and drive in the remaining 2-inch construction screws. The stretcher spacers are removed and the front stretcher can be clamped in place and attached with 3 pocket screws at each end. On the front, I use the toe kick as a reference, but the back needs a pencil line added to align the stretchers to keep them parallel. Again, the stretcher is clamped and screwed in place along the back edge. The same process is then repeated for the final upright support. I did run into an issue with some areas needing 3-inch screws, as the 2-inch screw would just spin due to voids in the imperfect construction grade plywood. Now on to attaching the toe kicks, which I decided to do with only me-nails and glue. I first apply glue to the uprights, then along the top edge of each board. Again, I used 1.5 inch brad nails in the fronts. I flipped the cabinet upright and now fired in 2-inch brad nails from the top down into the toe kicks for a little more holding strength. I then laid the cabinet on its front to begin spreading glue along all of the edges for the 1/4-inch hardboard to attach to. I then had my wonderful wife help me out and place the hardboard down without spreading the glue all over, as attaching the back with glue and crown staples gives the cabinet an insane amount of rigidity. I then cleared off the 3 sanders from my old sanding station and moved the dust collection hoses up and out of the way. The old station was dragged away so I could clean the area of debris. Next, I moved my lathe, which is goddamn heavy, from its original stand and transferred it over to its new home of my old sanding station. I cleaned the area and shimmied the lathe into place. I then bolted the lathe to its new stand, which offers much more storage than the old one. I then carefully lowered the new sanding station to the ground and dragged and kicked it into place. Off camera, I shimmed underneath the lathe stand and new cabinet to compensate for my uneven concrete floors. I then put my 3 sanders back in place and reconnected the dust collection hoses. The sanders were positioned correctly and held in place with a couple screws each. Next, I began by installing the bottom drawers by placing a spacer block to get the drawer slide to sit in the middle of the drawer sides. I then attached a jig which offset the drawer from the edges by 3/4 inch to accommodate for the drawer fronts. Each slide is held in place with 4 number 8 5/8 inch button head screws. The same process is then repeated on the other side. I reinstall the drawer slide piece that attaches to the drawer itself and place some 1/8 inch hardboard strips on the bottom so the drawer doesn't drag. The drawer is dropped in and pulled forward enough to reveal the first set of holes for mounting on each side. But before the first screw goes in, I use a block to flush up the slides and the front. The drawer is pulled out slightly to reveal the next set of holes, and those screws are then driven into each side. I then remove the drawer with the slides still attached to drive in the remaining screws outside of the cabinet. The same process is repeated for all drawers except the size of the spacer block is varied. For example, the bottom drawer is double deep, so my spacer for the next drawer was actually a piece of 3/4 inch plywood under a spare drawer. From here, it's rinse and repeat. This next step is optional and you can use any material you like for your drawer fronts, but I chose 3/4 inch maple veneer plywood because it was the cheapest plywood at Home Depot. Yes, that's right, the maple plywood was cheaper than the construction grade plywood, so I guess if I had to make this project again, not having any old material, I would have just done the entire thing with 3/4 inch maple plywood. Go figure. If you want to make this yourself or any other project I've made, I do have a full cut list available for free on my website, diybuilds.ca. To attach the drawer fronts, I used hot glue and eyeballed the spacing around each drawer to approximately 1/8 inch. Once the glue set enough to hold, I opened the drawer and drove in a few screws to permanently attach it. For the bottom drawer front, I laid a strip of 1/8 inch hardboard for ease of install while the hot glue cured. Next at the table saw, I have a blade beveled to 15 degrees and a scrap piece of 3/4 inch pine which I rip on both sides to create drawer pull blanks. These 3 strips are cut into 8 6-inch pulls at the miter saw. At the belt sander, I ease over all the hard edges to make the pulls more comfortable to grab. I first mark the left edge to center the pull and use my combination square to align the height. I add a small amount of glue to the back and fire in 2 pin nails to hold the pull in place while I open the drawer and drive in 2-inch screws from the back to make everything super secure. This is repeated for all 8 drawers except the bottom 2, which use shorter screws as the drawer front is taller than the drawer edges. The last thing to do is rip a bunch of 1/4-inch strips of pine to use as edge banding around the cabinet to hide the ugly plywood edges. I used my featherboard in reverse and moved my fence after each cut to keep this process as safe as possible. The edging was cut to fit and a small amount of glue was applied along the backs. All pieces were held in place with several 1-inch me-nails driven in every few inches. And with that, this project is complete.
Can you dig it?